Okay, welcome back, everybody. And once again, on behalf of everybody at the Economic Club of Canada, my name is Stephanie Gadwa, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our luncheon today. Before we begin, we are reminded and we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory and home of Indigenous people, the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewas, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, land steeped in a really rich history dating back many generations. The purpose of our acknowledgement today is to show our gratitude and our respect for their contributions and to recognize the role of treaty making in what is now Toronto. For those of you who might not be familiar with the Economic Club, we stand as one of Canada's most trusted podiums of record. We are one of the only nonpartisan national public policy platforms that unites leaders, innovators, and experts from across different industries to discuss and address key issues shaping the future of our country. Our foundation is firmly Canadian, yet our influence spans well beyond our borders. Our commitment to fostering collaboration and promoting thoughtful debate continues to drive so much of the work that we do. The Economic Club is more than just an event podium. It's a platform for transformative ideas, helping to guide Canada towards a brighter and a more prosperous future. We are thrilled to be with you today as the facilitators of Middle Power, Major Stakes, Canada, and a New Global World Order. The global economic order is shifting as geopolitical tensions and economic nationalism reshape trade, alliances, and cooperation. For Canada, this moment is pivotal. How can it navigate in a more fragmented world? How can it redefine its role as a middle power and adapt its partnerships and industries to changing supply chains? To get the discussion underway, please help me welcome your moderator, David Common, national news anchor, CBC News. And he's going to be joined by Goldy Hyder, President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada, the Honourable Bob Rae, Canada's 25th Ambassador to the United Nations, and Carolyn Wilkins, Senior Research Scholar, Griswold Center for Economic Policy, Princeton University. Let's give them a warm welcome.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to try to get right to it because we have three very experienced and wonderful people. There is an opportunity for you to ask questions, and I will do my best to get to those questions. But I do want to start with what I said to all of our panelists we would start with. It is so hard to figure out in your own business lines, in diplomacy, in politics, what next week is going to look like, particularly now, let alone a decade from now. But I thought I would give our panelists the impossible task of trying to look ahead 10 years from now at where this country might be, not in a sort of airy-fairy dreamy way, but in a very practical way, and then unpack some of the opportunities, the things that might need to happen to realize that vision, and some of the barriers, some of the speed bumps along the way. And so with that in mind, I will start with Goldy.
Great. Well, thanks very much, David. Thank you all for being here. Let me just say what a privilege it is to be here with my dear friends and Bob and Carolyn. Real honored to be on a panel with you. Let me say this about that question. First of all, I'm glad you're asking it because it suggests that we can think about the long term. And we're so short-sighted and so short-term in a lot of what's going on. But we're very fortunate. We actually have a federal government that's trying to think long-term, that is recognizing this moment as a hinge moment, as the Prime Minister has said. So a lot has happened in the last 1 year in terms, in fact, I would point you to a chart in the Spring Economic Update that has a list of things that have happened since the election a year ago. It's a lot of activity. And the answer to your question depends on how well we do those things that have been identified. And so we've got to get out of our own way in our country. We have to be making sure we're unified. I see a country 10 years out that can be an extremely prosperous country, a country that can be seen around the world as reliable, that can is a place to invest, is a place that can build the infrastructure that's necessary to get the assets that we have out of the ground and to the markets that need them. And yes, a country that still has a relationship with the #1 economy in the world, in the G7, and a country that is very, very focused on making sure that we're making the future brighter for our young people. One of the things I'm most worried about today, especially as I look around this room, is how much people are feeling anxiety about their futures. And the fact that you've asked about 10 years out, let's hope that what we do between now and then creates a better future for the young people in our country.
Now, Goldy used the word depends. You're not allowed to do that. You have to be definitive.
I definitively want everything that he just said. And I think that for Canada, what that really means at a high level is not a country that has a lot of aspirations and thinks about the things we can do, but can reflect in 2035 about what we've done and what we can do in the future in terms of what I call a really big investment deficit. We talk about our great skills, our great resources, our access to technology. We even developed some of it, but we don't deploy. We have an investment deficit in a scaling deficit that the Royal Bank of Canada put a number on it, 1.8 trillion. I'd like to look back on that and see that we've actually done that, or at least a big chunk of it. And I'd like to see that if we do the kinds of investments that Goldy was talking about in people, in infrastructure, that in actual things we can produce and send, like critical minerals, that will show up in our economic scorecard. Higher GDP per capita, which has been flatlining for years. We're going to see better public services. Things that people care about, actual housing that's affordable because we have capacity in the kind of workers and so a lot of things needs to be done to get there. But if we do, we'll not only be better off ourselves, but we will be in a stronger position as a middle power because we'll have something to bring to the table, both in terms of products and services we can deliver to other countries through supply chains or directly, and also credibility.
I would say all of the above, but I would provide a particular focus on some of the gaps that exist now that need to be closed. So the gap between North and South has to be closed. We have to see Canada as a whole, the whole country, including the most remote parts of the country that have been marginalized and have really been left undeveloped in ways that should continue to be the case in terms of human progress. I'd like to see a country that's better housed. I'd like to see a country that's even better educated than we are now, and where we talk about investment. It's not just investing in infrastructure, which is critical. I'd like to be able to see us get from one part of the city of Toronto to another more quickly. The Eglinton subway, let me point out to all my fans out there, was started by me in 1992. And so it's taken us a hell of a long time to build one subway. And you tell me how that's even possible. So when we look at trains, we look at infrastructure, we look at how we're moving people, we have to do that better. We have to also invest in research and development and make sure that we're providing that scope. And I agree with Goldy and with Carolyn. I mean, I think we're not going to run away from our relationship with the United States, but we have to balance that with a much more global sense of where markets are, where our potential is, and how we can work effectively. And finally, I think we need a joined up foreign policy that looks at our defense policy, our security policies, our diplomatic policies, and our military policies in a much more coherent way that makes us a reliable partner in every sense. Our population will grow to 60, 65, 70, 75 million people. We can never really tell exactly how that's going to take shape. We're a middle power, but we're actually a very prosperous middle power. We have tremendous potential to be way stronger than we are, and to do more, to be present in all of those things. And that's the world I think Canadians are now agreed needs to happen. There's an amazing amount of agreement among Canadian public opinion in what needs to happen. And as others have said, we need to execute. Mm-hmm. We've got to close the gap between the words and the deeds, between the talk and the walk. We've got to shut that gap down. And I always reminded when I was a student in England, the subway would come to a stop, and there would always be a voice that would come out of the sky saying, "Mind the gap." And that's something we have to pay attention to. We have to keep minding the gap, because there's a gap today, and that's the gap that has to be closed. And we need to see ourselves as going on that journey.
Bob has spoken about the willingness that many Canadians have. We've come through an election a year ago that had an outcome that was unthinkable even a year before that. We have investments in the military going on right now that would have been not just improbable, but impossible for the preceding 25, 30 years. There clearly is the appetite to do bigger, different things right now. What should be top of the list for the federal government, for Canadians as a whole, given that there is the willingness?
Well, we're focused on three things. First and foremost, geography is not going to change.
Yep.
We share 9,000 kilometers with the G1. I can tell you, having traveled around the world, a lot of countries would happily trade places with us, despite knowing everything that we know. So we've got to leverage that. We've got to stabilize that. That doesn't mean you're leaving the United States. We look at it from a U.S. plus strategy. You're going to continue to have your relationship, because this is a moment in history. It's a moment in time, but it's not permanent. Things change. Things change a lot. So we don't know where we're going as things go forward, but we're not moving away from the neighborhood. Do that. Secondly, and I think this is the heavier lift, and I think even Prime Minister Carney is seeing what a heavy lift it is to get the Federation, Bob, with all due respect, premiers and others, to work together to figure out how are we going to get out of our own way. You look at interprovincial trade barriers. We've been talking about them for decades. An interprovincial trade barrier is a tariff imposed by Canadians on Canadians. It is a larger tariff today, estimated to be about 7% cost. And I know Carolyn has a point of view on this, but at what Donald Trump is charging us, which is 5% on the things that are currently exempt. We should be livid about those interprovincial trade barriers. They should be gone yesterday. And yet they persist, and I know they're in somewhat of a sausage-making stage to try and get that done. But we've got to get out of our way.
Do you actually see movement? Are those barriers changing?
You know what?
I'm going
to believe the premiers I talked to that this is in the legislative process and that we're waiting to see the MOUs come to life. God willing, that happens, but would I bet a lot of money on it? No, because we continue to act local, very parochial of our own interests, right? So we can't be arguing against protectionism with America while having protectionism in Canada. It is inconsistent with our values when it comes to being free traders. We can't build the infrastructure that we need. We have some of it, let's be clear. Our services companies around the world, some of them are in this room today, have been wildly successful for decades, if not longer than even Canada's been around. It's the people who have goods in the ground that are struggling. We have some access now thanks to TMX. We have access through LNG Canada. But, you know, we can't get anything to Europe. Europe wants stuff. We had that opportunity. That door is pretty much closed now. You know, so we've got to build infrastructure. It's got to be done, obviously, in collaboration with our Indigenous partners. They're rights holders. There's a large conference taking place right here today with people we've worked with very closely on bringing about an Indigenous loan guarantee program that allows them to be a partner in an equity stake. So there's things that we need to do in Canada fast. That's the other point, David, fast. The last piece of it is simply the strategic diversification. You can't spray Canada all over the world. You got to figure out where can we have the biggest impact, where are the relationships we can leverage, who needs us most. So my argument today would be that's Asia. On the other hand, there's a lot of people making a case for saying we should be focused on the Western Hemisphere because there's an interest here in terms of what we can do. So Bob will have a better line of sight than I will, but we can't do it all. We have to be strategic in how we diversify.
Carolyn, if I can skip over you just for a moment and go to Bob, given that,
Yeah, I think the Americas are really important. I think they are a huge source of potential. There's a dramatically growing economies in some places, and many comparative issues with a number of countries that have economies that are not totally dissimilar from ours. And so we can work effectively with them. I think that's a real opportunity for us. I think Asia is key. When I was premier quite a long time ago, I led several delegations to Asia. And everybody said, "Why are you going to Asia?" You know, and they were, you know, whenever you travel, you get criticized in government. But it's key. You have to travel. You have to be there. You have to build the relationships over time, and you have to reinforce them. I must confess I'm a little different perhaps than Goldy in saying I don't think we can lose sight of the needs of the world, in the sense that the more marginalized we allow people to be, And the more we leave space for others, for example, in Africa, the Chinese will be all over it. They are all over
They
it.
are. Yeah.
They are, and they will be even more. So we can't afford to be part of an alliance that has an inward thinking. And by the way, I think it's important for us to think about this word, alliances. We are in a remarkable number of alliances, and we should continue to really work at them and build them up and let them have true impact. But I do think that, and I've spent some time working on this too, I do think this is an opportunity to really build on the partnerships that we've established between governments and First Nations communities. I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. And don't lose heart. Don't give up. Don't stop trying, and don't stop making it happen. I think there's been a whole change that's been taking place over the last 25 years in the national conversation on Indigenous issues. It's a rights conversation, always will be, but it's now also an interest conversation. And those two conversations need to keep on happening to deepen the investments and to deepen the benefits that flow to people who have been marginalized by the entire development process that we've had as a country over the last 200 years, when you think about it. So there's that opportunity that's still there.
I do want to go to the show me the money question and the $1 trillion scalability gap.
So anybody who's taken Economics 101 knows that scale really matters to competitiveness because it gives you efficiencies and cost advantages. And when we split our big country into 10 little provinces and a couple of territories, it's clear that we're going to be less efficient. So these interprovincial barriers aren't just parochial issues. They are real economic disadvantages that we impose on ourselves. And so I think that all the investment that we need to do is facing a number of barriers. One is scale. Is it going to have a rate of return? And can we scale internally in a way to make that happen? Is government procurement suitable to, as opposed to just subsidies that we might give you, suitable to providing that certainty of revenue over a period of time that makes it easier? Are the timelines for investment make sense at all for projects that require big upfront capital? There's nothing like a delay to make your rate of return be unproductive. And I think your point about relationships with Indigenous groups, getting in early with projects is just fundamental to improving those timelines. Plus, governments themselves figuring out how to streamline what are probably very inefficient processes that don't actually add value at the end of the day. I think the thing that I want to add that we haven't talked about so far is what are the tables? We're at a lot of tables, and the Harper government put in 10 or 11 trade agreements, and we haven't capitalized on that. I think that's a great advantage that we can do more with, but there's other tables that we need to be at as a middle power that we need to work on, and that's related to AI. And if you just think about the Mythos example with respect to their project and the cyber risks that are there, that's basically a U.S. story right now. The big companies with all the power are in the U.S.
Right.
And Canada, to manage this risk, to be more resilient, not just in terms of our trade relationships, but just real resilience in the cyber sense, depends on being at those tables. And I think it ties back to what you two have been saying in terms of building our industrial base, building our relationships with others, not just in critical minerals and oil and gas, but also in technology and in being able to contribute enough to be invited to those tables.
I wonder if I can expand on some of those tables, those alliances, and who we should be making nice with. There's some Europeans who apparently want Canada to be part of the EU, some Canadians who like that idea. The Prime Minister is heading off to Saudi Arabia. Those are two, at some point, those are two very different calculations. Who should we be connecting with?
Well, let me be blunt. The EU, actually becoming a member of the EU is like, you think reforming the Canadian Constitution is difficult? That's a swamp I don't want to go into.
Careful what you wish for.
I was wondering what word you were going to use.
So I think we need to build the relationships and deepen them and persist, and I think we need to see every gap as an opportunity. Where we previously, weren't, we could be there. And the reality of the world today is you could make up the difference very quickly if you're determined to do it. Our relationships with Saudi Arabia were in the tank 5 years ago. And now we recognize that represents an enormous opportunity as a hub and as a partner in ways that we can't afford to be out of. And while I agree with that we need to establish priorities all the time, I think it's exceptionally important to recognize that there are going to be opportunities in places 5 and 10 years from now that we're not even aware of today. There are going to be companies in Canada that are going to be successful that don't even exist today. And this is the mistake we make in assuming that the future is just a projection of where we are. It never is. The future is, it's another place. And so we need to understand that you got to create the platforms that allow you to get there, and recognizes that there'd be lots of opportunities that you're not aware of that will be there in the future, which is why I always think of anybody here who's coming out of university today, don't be discouraged by the labor market today. Recognize that labor markets change really fast, and you'll always benefit from an education. You'll always benefit from getting into the labor market anyhow you can, and then taking that as an opportunity to go forward. And I think that's something we have to keep on recognizing, that, again, that's a gap. There's a gap. There's a big youth unemployment number in Ontario right now. That number will come down, but only if we really get started on the things that we should do. And I have to confess, if I could be even remotely incorrect at the moment, I don't like the Protect Ontario ads. Why don't I like them? Because of the slogan. I used to be Premier of Ontario, but my philosophy is not just Protect Ontario. My philosophy is, let's advance Canada. Let's make Canada more resilient. And whatever we do has to be part of that national project. We can't afford projects that are too small. We have to have the biggest projects possible.
Part of the reason those Protect Ontario ads are on right now is because of the way in which we feel about our relationship with the Americans. And I know, Goldie, you have thoughts on the emotionality here.
Yeah, let me pick up on what Bob just said, because it is about controlling our own destiny. There's two things. I've had the privilege of traveling with Prime Minister Carney on many countries now, and more to come this year. And he's focused on two things. His first message is Canada is open for business. Canada is open for your investment. We need your money. We need $1 trillion of it in the next 5 years. We're going to diversify. We mean it this time. We're going to do it consistently, not episodically. Trust us. This is our agenda. And you should believe us, because we have this existential moment now in our relationship with the United States. We're not going to be able to get a divorce. We're not leaving. We're not joining anybody else. But we now know what a kid is, 11-year-old lemonade stand knows. One customer is bad for business. So let's make sure we have a lot of customers. So he's there seeking capital to come into the country. And by the way, that capital does say we're going to want access to the United States when we come here. Mm-hmm. So they're connected, those 2 points. The second piece of what he's been doing is really playing off the Davos speech, which from a content perspective was basically saying the quiet part out loud. And that's why it was so well received by so many people. But what's that really about? It is about trying to respond to a changing America. By the way, the Democrats are just as protectionist. The Democrats will keep most of the tariffs when they get there. The Democrats will not allow you to make cars if they've decided to make cars in America. So this is not a Donald Trump issue. This is an America issue. But we live in the neighborhood, so we've got to adjust to that. So what's the Prime Minister really talking about when he travels is saying, so take, for example, the TPP and the EU agreements, right? He's saying, can there be more collaboration amongst these middle powers? So if you go from Australia, New Zealand, India, all of Europe, in Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Canada, Mexico, Chile, there's a whole range of countries that if you put them together, they could have an economy or a block of somewhere around $20 trillion. So for context, the U.S. is $30 trillion. Okay? Now, you can't get away from America or China, no matter who you are. There is this great power rivalry. Just the names have changed from our lifetime. It used to be Russia and America. Now it's China and America, and who knows what it'll be in 50 years or 100 years. But this idea that maybe we can create supply chain resiliency. We're not trying to replace WTO. We're not trying to create a new United Nations or any of that. What we're saying is, hey, we're all kind of in this together. We're not superpowers. we believe in democracy. We believe in trade. We believe that we should honor the agreements that we make. Can we get together to create some confidence and some resilience in our economies, much like COVID talked about? What was COVID talking about? Friendshoring, nearshoring, can't have pharmaceuticals made somewhere. We have to do it ourselves. We need to make our own masks and our own ventilators. That was a crisis that focused the mind because lives were at stake. Now the life of your country is at stake. It's a different kind of a life. And so we've got to figure out how we form these alliances to help hedge. You're not getting away from America, but you have to have a hedge strategy of some kind, or an and strategy that says, yes, we're going to do business in America, but we're also going to ensure that we're not exposed to a single economy or a single actor, so that we can protect the long-term interests of our country and our citizens, and most importantly, bring about growth to our economy so that we're not reacting to every tariff policy that seems to come across the bow, which is not a temporary phenomenon, as I
But
mentioned.
we're also reacting as a population going, there are a lot of Canadians who just simply won't even cross
Yeah,
the
but
border.
David, that's emotion. I will say this. 50 some odd years here in Canada, I have always said that I sleep well at night because I have a confidence in the collective wisdom of Canadians, that we're actually a really smart group of people. Take 1988 during free trade. I was on campus. I never thought that thing was going to pass based on what I saw on campus. But the wisdom of the Canadian people said, you know what? Yeah, it's a superpower. We're going to lean in. We have confidence in ourselves. We're going to do a trade agreement. We're going to build our economy. Thank God we did that. We made that choice. That was a rational decision. It was separated from all the emotion and all the naysaying about we're going to lose our culture and we won't have hockey anymore and all of that other stuff. Canada's doing just fine. Thank you very much. In fact, it's doing even better as a result of that trade agreement. Today, I'm concerned that the emotion that is attached to the president has not allowed us to think clearly. When I see survey after survey saying we're going to join Europe, for example, or we're not going down to America anymore, we're not going to talk to Americans anymore, and it's spread from Donald Trump to America now. Well, half of America loves Canada, at least. Maybe more than that loves Canada. So be careful to let the emotion drive you, because I do think we have to recognize that geography determines your trade relationships. We are where we are. And as I said, there's not a country in the world that wouldn't change places with us to have that access and that proximity. But I get it. I get the emotion. I feel the same way.
So what's interesting?
You live in America, so you tell us.
They're kind enough to employ me there. So this isn't. It's like the new administration makes it feel really new, but in my mind, I listen, and it's the same in a sense. We have always in Canada acted as a middle power and had, you talked to the influence that we've had, and I saw it in the international financial regulation post 2008, the big crisis. There was a lot of banking reforms. And on the Basel Committee or the Financial Stability Board, which Mark Carney, by the way, chaired, we made a lot of difference in partnership with like-minded countries in a number of areas that were in the best interest of Canada. And so it wasn't just the U.S. and the Euro area kind of driving the bus. It was a lot of other countries at times when it really mattered, making a difference in terms of where we landed. And as a small open economy, that really mattered for in a number of maybe very geeky areas like over-the-counter derivatives, capital concentration, lots of things that wouldn't have turned out that way. And so I feel as if this is a call to action on the trade front, on a different front, but it's not a muscle that we have not exercised. It's just, it feels more urgent now. And I think in terms of developing partnerships, it's not just about trade directly, it's about getting our scale through integrating with supply chains, okay? Because it's not just we sell a widget to South Korea, it's that we have a trade agreement with them, and then South Korea decides they're gonna deploy capital in Canada and allow us to scale. That is a magic formula.
Yeah, and that requires a level of persistence that I think needs to be there more than it has been. We've tended to kind of see pendulums swing back and forth, and not see things in a big way as what we as a country. I think we've forgotten what we've done. I mean, we've what we've done in this part of the world is quite remarkable. And in building the New World after 1945 is incredibly remarkable in terms of our leadership at the United Nations, our leadership in the General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade, where we were the pen. We've been at the heart of every major development in the global economic and political community that's taken place since 1945. And we don't take enough credit for that. We don't say, because we're very humble people, and we often just sort of take it for granted. So if some guy says, you haven't done anything, you're not a real country, the Prime Minister obviously can't say, go to hell. We've done a hell of a lot more than you think, and we're very proud of it. But I could say it.
And just did.
And I just did.
Yeah.
Bob, that's a good segue. We're in our final 13 minutes, so I'm going to go to the questions from the floor, and we actually have one that dovetails well with what we've just heard there. Why aim to be just a middle power is the question. We're G7 nation, 2 trillion plus economy, natural resources, fresh water, and so many other factors. Can we aim to the glory you're speaking about? And I do wonder if it's dated glory that you're speaking about, Bob, if we are still punching at the same level that we once did.
No, I don't think it's dated in that sense, but I think the reality of every one of your achievements in life as a person and as a country is if once you stop and you just look back and say, I was great, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
You can't stop. Here I am, 77, still popping away. I mean, you've got to keep on going. And I think as a country, we need to be proud of what we've done, and we also need to say, how can we go forward? The only debate that I think when you say what is a great power, usually we associate great powers not only with great economic power, but also with a nuclear weapon. I mean, let's be blunt about it. The reason that we've never really responded to Russia the way we should have responded to Russia in Ukraine is because we were afraid of the nuclear factor. And China is the same. North Korea is a tiny country, but they've got a nuclear weapon. Now, do we want one? In my view, there's so many reasons why that's not a great idea, not a great goal for us. So when we talk about our greatness, I think we have to be clear about what is that and how is that exercised. But the fact is, on the defense side, we became so weakened in our capacity on the military and security side that we were not able to participate in any significant way in our overall obligations. And that was a mistake. That was a serious error of judgment. But frankly, we blame our governments, okay, but it's collective judgment too. Canadians never gave this the priority that it deserved. And our security needs this. The Swedes learned that. I mean, people look up to Sweden as a great soft power. You say, yeah, but we're talking about buying a plane from them, right? We're not selling them one. So we need to understand that there's possibilities for us to still become more significant. Come back to the good news. The good news is technology is changing so fast. What is the most effective military power today in the world? The answer is Ukraine.
Yeah.
Why? Well, because they pulled off a feat nobody thought was even remotely possible. They've developed, over 5 years, they've developed a defense industry that is nimble, fast, effective enough, and far enough advanced that it's been able to defend their country from the attack from one of the largest military powers in the world. And nobody thought that was even remotely possible. So we should be learning and applying lessons from Ukraine, from other places. We can become nimble, and we can become effective, and we can become a player in a great many parts of the economy and a great many parts of the world. But we have to get our act together, and we have to have an approach from public opinion that says we don't want you to just say some goal that's just out of the air, that they got no infrastructure to support it. We have to have the means to do what we say we want to do. And that requires a significant change in how we've done business.
I see you want to, we are getting other questions.
Yeah, just very
we'll
quickly.
Go to you, but
Very
I will
quick.
just also throw in, if not a nuclear weapon, is there something else?
So Bob touched on something I want to pick up on, which is, look, the idea that we're going to be a superpower, militarily or politically, is probably a bit of a stretch. And I'm not sure we want to be. But we are we can be an energy superpower. We can be a food superpower. We can be a nuclear superpower. We can be a critical mineral superpower. Leverage and play to your strengths to have influence in the world is different than saying, I'm going to beef up on nukes or I'm going to beef up on military. That's not the Canadian way, the Canadian approach. Although I do think it's good that one of the outcomes of everything that we've just gone through is a reminder that when you make a commitment to something like NATO, you keep your word. And the fact that we've had to respond and do that very quickly is good. It's a good thing because it's led to something that I think is critical, which is the beginning of a defense industrial policy. See, we don't have an industrial policy for our country. This is a moment we're going to start figuring out what we want to be. And it's from doing those things, that journey, where you come out at the other end and say, and this is our place in the world. I don't think it's to be a military superpower, but I do believe the notion of soft power, which Bob alluded to, is something very available to us. And I think Davos was an example of Canada saying, hey, if someone needs to lead, we're prepared to lead.
Other than speeches, how do we project soft power?
Well, I think you're seeing some of the things I just mentioned. If you're able to be the one who convenes, if you're able to be the one who brings people together, like this attempt of the EU and TPP, like the summit that's going to be held here for sovereign wealth funds to be held in Canada, to say, come, establish your base here, get access to those resources that empower you, that empower us, and de-risk some of the exposure that you have to
The
single
defense
products.
bank that's coming somewhere here.
Defense bank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carolyn.
The only thing I would add is that if we're going to get there, and I hope we do, and it's a good aspiration, we need to change part of our culture that's anchored in modesty, which is just such a wonderful trait, but that doesn't get in the way of being proud of our national champions and doesn't get in the way of being proud of success, as opposed to somehow feeling that they must have done something wrong if they got there. And it's going to take a risk tolerance that sometimes we don't like failure, and we focus on that as opposed to saying, well, actually risk and reward are related and we're going to have to take some risk. And that may be a soft comment, but I think it's just permeates through every decision we make.
Okay, here's a provocative question, Bob, but you like them. Would Bob describe Iran 4 years from now as he just described Ukraine, given the ingenuity that it's shown in its conflict with the greatest military power on earth?
I think it's, to be honest, I think it's not to be flip about it. I think it really is too early to tell. I don't think we know how the events in Iran and in that region are going to unfold over the next while. It's very, very unpredictable. But I do think that countries make a major mistake, if I may say so. Superpowers make a huge mistake. I think the Russians made a huge mistake in Ukraine. I think the Americans, my personal view, I think have made a major mistake with respect to Iran. And I think that the consequences of that should lead those countries and others. Yeah, we need to be a little prouder, and I can think of other countries that need to be a little more humble in terms of how they look at things. And
But you're not naming names.
No, I would never do that. But I want to just come back to one thing that Carolyn said, because I believe it's so profoundly true. And I know many people will laugh at this or not, but we need to embrace failure. We need to understand that nothing great ever happens unless you've failed at something else. If you look at those people who've discovered things or invented things or created things, every one of them has been a failure before they were a success. And in Canada, we're a belt and suspender country. We like to be super cautious and prudent and not say or do things that might lead to a reaction. We have to be less afraid of that. But we also have to learn how to deliver. And I keep coming back to this thing of the gap between what we have said we would do and what we end up doing. And that's something it's so much smarter to aim a little less high, maybe, and get there and make sure you're there and then keep going. And I think that's the kind of approach that we need to take. With Iran, I would say we are going to have to learn how to deal with countries that we have profound disagreements with. And we're going to have to figure out ways of dealing with them without going to war with them. Because the costs and consequences of war are devastating. The economic, the social, the personal, the pain that's inflicted. It's been extraordinary. And we look around in Ukraine, you look at the Middle East, you look at the conflicts that we've seen, that we're still seeing today, the cost of those is incredible. And so this notion that somehow you could just move in, kill a whole bunch of people, knock down a whole bunch of buildings, destroy whatever you want to destroy, and then say, onward, on we go. Yeah, no, it doesn't work that way. It's just not the right path. And I think Canada, you talk about soft power. How could we exercise soft power? We could be a country that starts to say, how can we work with other countries to try to create an alternative to some of the direction that these things are going in, because they're not going in the right direction.
Carolyn, I do want to swing back to you only because in our conversations leading up to today, we talked about trying to be very practical. You emphasized this, and I want to just give you an opportunity in case we have not been sufficiently to this point to bring up anything that you feel has been left.
So yeah, because you have these big aspirations, and anybody who's ever done a big project knows that it's the people underneath that actually make it happen. It's every decision, every project plan, every approval, every compromise you need to make to get it done over the line. And that takes everybody in the room, that takes the public service, it takes people coming together. And I saw it firsthand in financial regulations where we got agreements that had compromises in them. It had a lot of long weekends and a lot of coffee, and a lot of people that were annoyed at the end, and others that were happy. And I feel like we often get lost in that. And so anything we can do to empower the public service, to empower ourselves, and any partnerships it's maybe my call to action. We need to go into it with a let's get it done mentality.
We have 2 minutes left. We have a question about the Sovereign Wealth Fund that has been announced. And the question is really whether it will help resolve some of the gaps mentioned or cause more red tape. Is this just capital? Is it capable of doing more? And I will note we have 2 minutes, so 15-word answers on complex monetary policy.
Carolyn speaks for Bob and I on this one.
You need to say the question again. I'm so sorry.
Your thoughts on the Sovereign Wealth Fund as announced?
So it's doing something different from the infrastructure bank. Is the equity piece that's really different. It's not a fund it's going to borrow to get the money, so it's a bit different that way. And so I think the jury's out, because the devil's in the details about the governance. Who's going to choose the projects? Are we going to have private sector crowded into this fund or not? And so there's potential there. I really hope it's realized, but the government needs to realize that the best capital deployment decisions are made privately, and what they can do is they can help to solve the coordination problem that always happens, or help manage some of the risks that are in the tail that are hard to do. But that's their big value added. The rest is the private sector.
Well, I mean, the fund's a tool, and in a time of uncertainty, you need vehicles. Fine. I'm with Carolyn on this, not surprisingly. The best policy that costs you the least is to create the conditions for private capital to be deployed in your country. And that's what matters more than anything else. And remember, private capital does not owe your country anything. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have any nationality, no patriotism behind it. It will go to where it's welcome, and it will go to the path of least resistance. So let's do everything we can to make Canada the best place in the world to invest, to live, to grow, to raise a family. And it's available to us. And all it is about having the courage of leadership to make the policies in a complicated country. You know, it is not easy to govern Canada. I'm extremely empathetic for anyone who's in the role of government in our country. But if not now, when? And I think Canadians are frankly far ahead of our elected officials in asking our governments to do just that. Go faster, go further, and strengthen our country, because we're awoken now. We want to win. And one thing I always say, when Canadians go into the corner, they come up with the puck. We can win, and we've proven it in the Olympics. There's no reason we can't prove it in the economy.
I think we need to, the real positive thing about what the government has announced, I think, is that we need a public entity that's going to demonstrate by its effectiveness and its professionalism and its determination to invest equity in good projects, that it will frankly promote the private sector to do the same. Our banks are incredibly cautious. much of the money they make comes from mortgages. These are not exactly like real high risk investments. These are belt and suspender ways of spending money. And I agree with Goldie. We need the private sector to be key partners in taking risks and investing their equity into great projects. Well, I don't think they're going to do it on their own. I think they need to see somebody else. Okay, the government's in this thing. We've got equity coming from the public sector to do this. Let's go ahead with it. So that's why I favor it. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good model. Frankly, we used to do this in Ontario in the 90s. In order to get some of the private sector partners to commit, we had to get the government to commit as well in terms of putting its own equity in through the structures that we had. This is a bigger version of that, but it's part of the same philosophy that, yeah, the private sector, we are going to be an effective country in which the private sector is going to play the key role in terms of moving investment forward. But the word of the Canadian example is one of partnerships, and I think if the public sector is not there, we're not going to necessarily have the kind of movement from the private sector that we need. But we all have to listen to some of the criticisms of the idea and say, okay, how do we ensure that the kind of doomsday scenario that's being portrayed by the critics of this idea, how do we make sure that actually that doesn't happen? And I think that's really what we have to do. Take the cautions that are there. Yeah, of course there are going to be cautions. Opposition parties will be critical. I used to be an opposition party member, so I know what that's like. But eventually you realize that that kind of negativity doesn't really help you build anything creative. It just destroys. And we need to be builders in Canada, and we need to keep building. And that's going to require an element of positivity that looks at every initiative and says, okay, let's try that and see if we can make it work. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. But we got to keep trying. Can't be afraid of failure.
I said I was going to keep us on time. I didn't do that, but I kept us within 3 minutes of time. So I want to thank.
Yeah, but those were my 3 minutes. They were fantastic.
They were fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Bob.
Things you can't do on air.
Exactly.
To David, Goldie, Bob, and Carolyn. Only time will tell where Canada ends up, and we know that so many of the choices that are made today, tomorrow will impact all of us in the future. So this is a conversation we will continue long after today's event. Now, please mark your calendars for some of our upcoming ECC events. On May the 26th, we are hosting Charles Milliard, leader of the Quebec Liberal Party, for a fireside chat with Tasha Kerrigan. And on June the 2nd, we are hosting our second in the executive chair with Rob Coomer. This time we are welcoming Larry, Ian, and Graham Rosen of Harry Rosen, and they're going to be discussing the future of Canadian retail. You can find ticket information on our website. Thank you for joining us on this Friday afternoon. Enjoy your weekend.